The day the Castillo estate caught fire, two things vanished without a trace. A billion-dollar contract that never got signed. And a girl who was supposed to witness it. 17 years later, the maid's daughter walks through those gates pretending to be someone she's not. And uncovers a forged empire, a missing signature. And a clause so dangerous, it was designed to erase bloodlines. What her mother whispered to her was not a warning. It was a map. And at the end of it is a name Julian Castillo thought he'd buried forever. The truth was never lost. It was waiting to be found by the wrong girl. At exactly the right time. The Castillos lived on the far edge of Blackwater Hills, in a house no one had ever entered without permission, and few had ever been invited. The mansion stretched over 4 acres of manicured estate, with ivy-laced iron gates that opened only for scheduled guests. Mr. Julian Castillo, the man behind Castillo and Wren Holdings, was known for two things, his wealth, and the distance he kept from the world. But there was one woman who passed through those gates every day without fail. Her name was Alma Reyes. She wore a gray uniform, sensible shoes, and carried a brown leather tote that had frayed at the edges. For 12 years, she had cleaned the Castillo mansion. She dusted rooms that hadn't been used in decades, polished marble floors that gleamed like mirrors, and served meals she could never afford. Her hours were long, her pay modest, and her silence invaluable. What Alma had never told anyone, not even her daughter, was that she once saved Julian Castillo's life. That secret had bought her more than a job. It had earned her something far more delicate, leverage. Her daughter, Isadora, was 17, bright-eyed, and too curious for her own good. She had grown up hearing only fragments about the Castillo mansion. Her mother had forbidden her from visiting, always with the same firm tone, "That is not our world." But one early morning, Alma came into Isadora's room just before sunrise. She stood over her sleeping daughter for a long while, then gently touched her shoulder. "Wake up," she whispered. Isadora blinked, dazed. "Mama? What's wrong?" Alma hesitated. The words she was about to say had lived behind her teeth for years. But she saw the chance now, the opening. The Castillos were vulnerable, and it was time someone held them accountable. "You're coming with me today," Alma said softly. "To the mansion?" "Yes. But you're not going as my daughter." Isadora sat up, heart racing. "Then who am I?" Alma reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, inside of which were forged identification papers, Isadora's photo, a new name, an employment reference from a closed-down agency. Alma's hands trembled slightly as she passed it over. "You're the new assistant to Mr. Castillo's lawyer. Her last one quit. I overheard a call, he needs someone discreet. You start today." "Mama, this is, why? Why are you doing this now?" Alma leaned in close and whispered 6 words that would stay with Isadora for the rest of her life. "He never signed the real contract." Isadora's eyes widened. "What contract?" Alma didn't answer directly. She stood, straightened her apron, and headed for the door. "Get dressed. Wear the navy dress. Don't speak unless spoken to." As they drove through the hills, Alma kept glancing at her daughter through the rearview mirror. She looked like she belonged in another world, chin high, hair tied, heart pounding. Alma parked a block away from the mansion, walked Isadora to a side gate, and handed her a lanyard. "Walk to the east wing. There's a law office inside. Her name is Marla Kovac. Don't flinch, don't lie, and never mention you're my daughter." Isadora stepped forward, then paused. "What did you mean, he never signed the real contract?" Alma looked her in the eye, then leaned in once more, her voice barely above a breath. "He buried the original. We're going to find it." Then she turned and disappeared down the path toward the servants' entrance. Isadora walked through the east garden, marveling at the quiet elegance of the grounds. There were marble statues half hidden under creeping moss, and fountains so still they looked frozen in time. A guard checked her badge, waved her through. Inside, the law office was a minimalist contrast to the opulence outside. Marla Kovac was a stern woman with platinum hair and a gold pen she never put down. She didn't smile when Isadora entered, only gestured toward a chair. "You're early. That's good. Can you type?" "Yes," Isadora replied quickly, lowering her voice. 85 words per minute. Marla nodded. "You'll need to. There are revisions to process, files to organize. We're preparing something sensitive." Isadora swallowed. "A contract?" Marla looked up, her eyes sharp. "Yes. For the Castillo estate. A long-standing agreement is about to expire. Mr. Castillo wants full control again." Isadora tried not to react. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. He never signed the real contract. The morning passed in quiet tension. Files slid across her desk, confidential memos, scanned copies of agreements, pages marked draft. She read as she typed, absorbing details, property transfers, shell companies, restrictive clauses. One file had Julian Castillo's signature on it, but it was dated years after the original execution. She double-checked the clause referenced in Marla's notes. Schedule A, see original addendum, filed 2008. Isadora clicked through the digital archive. Nothing before 2012. At noon, Marla left for a call. The office door clicked shut behind her. Heart racing, Isadora stood, walked to the locked filing cabinet in the back corner. She inserted the key Marla had left hanging by mistake and opened the top drawer. It was there. A yellowing envelope labeled in pencil, "Original, do not file." Inside was a single sheet of parchment. Handwritten terms. A witness signature. And Julian Castillo's name, unsigned. Isadora barely had time to read the last line before the office door opened again. Marla was back. And her eyes locked instantly onto the open drawer. "What exactly are you doing?" she asked coldly. Isadora turned slowly, trying to steady her breath. She had only seconds. Her fingers clutched the original contract behind her back. And for the first time, she realized, she wasn't just pretending anymore. She was now part of something she didn't understand. But she couldn't back out. Not anymore. Isadora didn't blink. She closed the drawer calmly and turned, the yellowed contract still behind her back, fingers gripping it so tightly they turned white. "I was looking for a reference number," she said, voice steady. "For the 2008 addendum." Marla Kovac raised an eyebrow, her eyes narrowing. "That drawer is off limits to junior assistants." "I didn't know." "You do now." Marla walked past her without another word and sat down. She gestured toward the monitor. "Back to work. There's a new file coming in from the legal team in Geneva. Translate the key clauses and flag anything regarding transfer of beneficiary." Isadora returned to her desk and logged back in, but her mind raced. The contract behind her back was warm from her palm. She slowly slid it into her messenger bag, nestled between two legal pads. Her heart pounded with every move, waiting for Marla to change her tone, to stand up, to accuse. But she didn't. Instead, Marla took out a red pen and began circling phrases on a separate document. Every stroke of the pen felt like a countdown. Isadora typed with mechanical precision, her eyes on the screen, but her thoughts were a storm. If the original contract had never been signed, then everything Julian Castillo claimed to own, everything the new documents were built upon, rested on a lie. Her mother had known this. For years. Why hadn't she told anyone? And what exactly did she expect Isadora to do now? At 3:14 p.m., Marla stood up. "I have a meeting in the West Wing. I'll be gone 20 minutes. Print the revised trust letter, and don't touch anything else." Isadora nodded. The moment the door shut, she moved quickly. She slid the contract out of her bag and scanned it using the office machine, emailing a copy to herself with the subject line, laundry schedule. She then tucked the original into the back of the file cabinet, behind a binder labeled Foreign Holdings, Dormant. It was risky to leave it there, but she couldn't take it out again, not with Marla watching her every move. By the time Marla returned, the trust letter was printed, and Isadora was stapling it with a calm expression. That evening, back in their modest apartment, Alma was already cooking when Isadora walked in. The scent of simmering garlic and onions filled the small kitchen, but Isadora didn't smile. She pulled the scanned contract up on her phone and slid it across the table. Alma stared at it for a long time. Her eyes flicked across each line, then settled on the bottom. "See it?" Isadora whispered. "No signature," Alma murmured. "You were right." Alma sat down slowly. It was drawn up after Julian's father died. The terms stated that the property and holding company would remain in joint trust with the original co-founder's family, Emilio Navarro's grandchildren. But Julian wanted full control. So he buried this and filed a forged amendment 5 years later. Why would they agree to a joint trust in the first place? Because Emilio saved Julian's father during the fire in 1994. Gave him a home, helped rebuild the company. Julian was just a teenager back then. But when he took over, he didn't want to share anything. Isadora leaned forward. "So what happens now?" Alma looked at her daughter with a mix of fear and pride. "Now we find the Navarro family. They're the rightful co-beneficiaries. If they know this contract exists, they'll challenge the estate. They'll do more than that." Alma stood and opened the narrow closet near the back door. From the top shelf, she retrieved a battered metal box. Inside were photos, receipts, a bundle of old letters, fragments of a life before the mansion. She pulled out a photo and handed it to Isadora. It showed 2 young boys, arms around each other, smiling with scraped knees and matching backpacks. "That's Julian," Alma said, tapping the taller one. "And that's Emilio's grandson. Gabriel. Do you know where he is?" "No. But I know where he used to be." The next morning, Isadora returned to the Castillo estate with a plan. She arrived early and pretended to be reviewing files in the East Wing office. Marla hadn't shown up yet, and the place was still quiet. Isadora made her way toward the storage archive behind the law office, an area she hadn't been allowed into yet. She used the passcode Alma had whispered to her the night before, 1-9-9-4. Inside, the air was thick with dust and secrecy. Dozens of file boxes lined the walls, many with hand-scrawled labels, Castillo Limited, Cayman, Navarro, medical records, bank claims, sealed. She found a binder labeled Navarro Settlement Attempts, and inside were 2 letters from a law firm in Argentina, one dated 2013, the other 2017. Both were attempts to assert rights to the original agreement. Both had been ignored. And both were signed by Gabriel Navarro. As she read the second letter, a noise made her freeze. Footsteps. She slipped the letter into her pocket, quietly shut the binder, and ducked behind a low shelf. The door opened. Heavy boots thudded against the floor. Then silence. She held her breath. A voice, low and tense, echoed in the room. "She's poking around. Tell Mr. Castillo." It was the security chief. Isadora clenched her jaw. They knew. She waited 5 more minutes, heart pounding so hard it echoed in her ears, before slipping out the side door. She didn't go back to the office. Instead, she walked straight to the back garden and pretended to take a call. Then she left the estate. That night, Alma sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her old flip phone. She hadn't used it in years, but one number was still saved under G. With shaking hands, she pressed call. It rang twice before a voice answered, gruff and disoriented. "Who is this?" "Gabriel, it's Alma Reyes. I worked for your grandfather." At the mansion. Silence. Then, I remember. There's something you need to see. What? The contract. The real one. The one Julian never signed. Another silence. Then a long breath. I'm in Madrid now, Gabriel said slowly. I can be in Blackwater Hills in 2 days. Alma's hand trembled as she lowered the phone. Isadora stood by the window, watching headlights pass. They know, Mama, she whispered. Security. Marla. Maybe even Julian. Alma looked at her daughter and nodded. We have 2 days. Then the apartment light flickered, and the power went out. The apartment plunged into darkness so suddenly it felt personal. Isadora stood frozen by the window, her phone casting a dim glow. Outside, the streetlights on Havenwood Lane still burned steady, illuminating the rows of quiet apartments. It wasn't a citywide blackout. This was just them. Alma moved quickly, pulling Isadora away from the window. Don't speak, she whispered. They crouched behind the kitchen counter as Alma reached into the drawer and retrieved a small flashlight. She clicked it once, then stopped. On the hallway wall, where the light hit briefly, something was scrawled in red. Silence keeps you safe. Isadora's blood went cold. Mama. Alma's voice was ice. We need to leave. Now. She moved like someone who had practiced this before. She grabbed her old tote bag, stuffed the metal box of documents inside, and handed Isadora the burner phone she hadn't touched in years. Don't turn it on unless we're separated. What's happening? Who would come here? The same people who made the original contract disappear. They exited through the fire escape, careful not to make a sound. Alma led them through the alley, past the old church on 6th and toward an all-night diner where the waitress didn't ask questions. They sat in a corner booth, lights low, sipping watery coffee. Isadora hadn't spoken for 10 minutes. Then finally, you've done this before. Alma stared into her cup. Julian was 22 when he pushed Emilio out. I saw things I shouldn't have. Documents that went missing, conversations in the middle of the night. And one day, Emilio stopped coming to the estate. No one mentioned him again. Why did you stay? Because I didn't know how deep it went. And by the time I did, they already knew my name. Isadora swallowed. Did they threaten you? Alma didn't answer. At dawn, they took a bus out of Blackwater and rode in silence to the next county, where Alma's cousin owned a rundown motel. The windows had duct tape across the panes, and the mattress smelled of old tobacco. But the door locked, and that was enough. Later that afternoon, Alma called Gabriel again. You're sure you weren't followed? He asked. We've moved. Burned the files. You need to come with someone you trust. Meanwhile, back at the Castillo estate, Marla Kovac sat in her private office, the blinds drawn. Julian Castillo stood across from her, arms crossed, face unreadable. You let the girl into the archives, he said flatly. She claimed to be looking for reference numbers. I underestimated her. Julian stared at the floor for a long time. What does she know? Enough. He turned slowly toward the window, watching the wind sway the trees outside. The Navarros won't let this rest if they see the original. Especially not Gabriel. Marla looked up. You want me to intercept him? No, Julian said. We'll let him come. Let him believe the truth is safe. Marla raised an eyebrow. You have a plan? Julian turned and gave her a thin smile. I always do. 2 days later, Gabriel Navarro stepped off the plane at a private airstrip 30 miles outside Blackwater Hills. He was taller now, with lines carved around his eyes and a tired elegance to his movements. A woman followed behind him, carrying only a leather case and a steel gaze. They drove to the motel in silence, the wind hissing across the windshield. Gabriel knocked once at room 5. Alma opened the door slowly. Their eyes met for the first time in 20 years. "You've aged better than I have," he said. Alma smiled softly. "I doubt that." Gabriel stepped inside, glancing at Isadora. "You must be the daughter." Isadora nodded. "I have something to show you." They sat at the small table, and Isadora opened the folder. She laid out the scans of the original contract, the scanned 2013 and 2017 letters, and the fake addendum Julian had filed in 2012. Gabriel read each one carefully, lips pressed in a tight line. When he finished, he sat back and ran a hand through his graying hair. "Do you know what this means?" he said slowly. "If this holds up in court, Julian doesn't own the estate." "Not entirely. By right, my family holds 40% of the trust. Every sale, every investment, it's all contestable." Alma spoke quietly. "He'll fight." Gabriel's companion, the woman with the leather case, spoke for the first time. "He can fight all he wants. This document predates his amendment. It's the foundation. Without a valid signature, every transaction since is built on sand." Gabriel looked at her. "Lucia's the best civil litigator in Madrid. She's helped me prepare for this day for years." Isadora leaned forward. "Then what do we do now?" Gabriel tapped the edge of the contract. "We file. Quietly. We bring a restraining order on Castillo's liquid assets. Once he realizes we've moved legally, he'll try to buy us off." Lucia nodded. "He'll offer millions. But we don't want the money. We want the truth." But before they could say another word, the motel's landline rang. Everyone stared at it. Alma picked it up. "Hello." There was only static. Then, faintly, a voice. "You're making a mistake." Alma froze. "You think exposing this will protect you?" the voice continued. "There are things buried in this contract none of you understand. He didn't sign it for a reason." Then the line went dead. Isadora stood. "We have to move. Now." Lucia's eyes were dark. "They know Gabriel's here." But Gabriel didn't move. He pulled another document from his coat pocket, one Alma and Isadora hadn't seen before. A page with Julian Castillo's signature. But it wasn't on the contract. It was on a confession. Gabriel unfolded it slowly. "This is why I came back." Alma leaned in, her voice cracking. "What is that?" Gabriel looked at her with something like grief in his eyes. "A sworn letter. Written by Julian's father. The night before he died." Lucia reached out and unfolded it further. It read. "If this letter is found, it means my son has chosen the wrong path. The trust belongs to both families. Do not let him erase history." And beneath it, scrawled in faded ink. "Forgive me, Emilio." The room fell silent. Then suddenly, glass shattered. A brick had crashed through the window. Taped to it was a single page. A copy of the contract. With a blood-red X drawn across it. The wind whistled through the shattered window, carrying flecks of glass across the worn motel carpet. Isadora stepped back, her breath shallow. Gabriel knelt to pick up the brick, turning it slowly in his hand. The weight of it felt heavier than stone. This was a message. Lucia peeled the taped page from its surface and held it up to the dim ceiling light. The red X slashed across the contract copy in bold strokes of ink, jagged at the edges like it had been drawn in fury. "No note," she murmured. "Just the mark." "It's Julian," Gabriel said quietly. "He knows we've seen the letter. He's not trying to deny anything anymore, he's warning us." Isadora clenched her fists. "So what now? We hide? Run again? He could have hurt us." "No," Lucia said. "We push forward. Harder. Alma picked up the copy and laid it next to the original scans on the table. We need more than just the unsigned contract and a confession. If we're going to take on Castillo's lawyers in court, we need proof that he knew, intentionally, that the signature was never finalized. Gabriel nodded slowly. Then we need the vault. Lucia blinked. You're serious? Alma looked between them. What vault? Gabriel leaned forward. Julian's father kept a private archive hidden in the estate's original west wing, a fireproof vault installed during renovations in the late 90s. My grandfather told me about it once, before he died. Said it held early drafts of every legal agreement, the trust declarations, the handwritten letters that started the company. Originals, before any tampering. Isadora's voice rose slightly. So why haven't we gone there yet? Because the vault was sealed, Gabriel said. After Julian took control, the room was stripped. At least publicly. But if the vault is still there, and if it still holds the first contract draft, it will have notes. Margins, intent, even Castillo Sr.'s own annotations. That, Lucia said, is the real signature we need. Alma was already shaking her head. We'd never get in. The west wing is permanently closed, no staff is allowed beyond the marble corridor. They even removed the door handles years ago. Isadora exhaled. Unless someone's already inside. Alma froze. Gabriel turned. What do you mean? Isadora stood. The day I found the original contract in the archives, I saw a man leaving the west wing. He wasn't wearing a uniform. Didn't look like staff. Tall, maybe 40, had a scar across his cheek. I thought he was security, but he wasn't carrying a badge. Lucia frowned. Someone's guarding it. Or working in it, Isadora said. Julian's hiding more than just a missing signature. He's protecting whatever's left in that vault. Gabriel stood. Then we find a way in. 2 nights later, Isadora returned to the Castillo estate as if nothing had happened. Marla Kovac welcomed her back with a cold glance, but said nothing. She didn't ask about the sudden disappearance, nor did she mention the prior incident in the archives. But Isadora could feel the pressure in every look, every pause. They knew. But they were waiting. Which made her next move even riskier. At 9:47 p.m., long after most staff had left, Isadora slipped away from the East Wing office with a copy of the master floor plan she'd memorized from the archives. She moved down the west corridor, heels silent on the stone, past the "closed for renovation" sign that hadn't changed in over a decade. The marble hall stretched out before her, polished and perfect. There were no cameras. Only a narrow brass panel where a doorknob should have been, and a motion sensor just above the corner ceiling trim. She took a deep breath and pulled the access card from her pocket. It had taken Alma 3 days to duplicate it using a sliver of Marla's original badge and the help of an old friend who owed her a favor. There was no guarantee it would work. She tapped it against the sensor. A soft beep. Then a hiss. The door clicked open. Inside, the west wing was nothing like the rest of the mansion. Dust coated every surface. Plastic sheets hung over old armoires and chandeliers. The walls were faded, not repainted in years. Paintings had been removed, only outlines of where they once hung remained. And at the end of the hallway stood a heavy vault door, encased in steel and lined with copper bands that gleamed faintly in the dark. Isadora approached, her heartbeat a thrum in her ears. The keypad glowed dim blue. 6 digits. She stared at it, breathing slowly. Julian had always been obsessed with numbers, Alma said once. Particularly one date. 1994. The fire. She typed, 199419. The screen blinked red. She tried again. 041994. Still red. Then she remembered, Julian's birthday. May 10th. She typed, 051094. Green light. The vault door clicked. And groaned open. Inside was a room no larger than a walk-in closet. But its walls were lined with shelves of leather-bound books, original folders, and thick manila envelopes with wax seals. The air smelled of old cedar and carbon ink. She stepped inside and pulled on a pair of gloves from her pocket. The first folder she opened was labeled Estate Trust Agreement, Draft 1A, December 2007. Inside, in a bold, clear hand, were notes scribbled in the margins. Ensure Emilio's family remains co-beneficiary. Do not allow amendment without both signatures. And then, beneath a line scratched out in haste. Julian disagrees, says control must shift. She took photos of every page, every annotation. Then a sound behind her made her spin. Footsteps. Not soft. Not cautious. Whoever it was knew exactly where she was. Isadora backed into the vault as the hallway lights flickered. A shadow crossed the marble threshold. It wasn't Marla. It wasn't Julian. It was the man with the scar. His voice was deep. Measured. You should have stayed out of this. Isadora's hand fumbled behind her, brushing the edge of the shelf. Then her fingers found a small leather book, one embossed with Castillo Sr.'s initials. She grabbed it. The man stepped forward. Isadora ran. She darted past him, knocking his shoulder hard, sprinting down the corridor as alarms began to shriek through the estate. Red lights flared. Doors slammed shut behind her. But she didn't stop. She had the ledger. The one thing Julian never meant to be found. And as she burst through the east wing exit and into the garden, she knew. They would never let her leave in peace now. But it was too late. The truth was out. And someone else had seen her. Watching from the trees. Snapping photos. Sending them to someone who hadn't revealed themselves yet. Someone who had more to lose than even Julian Castillo. Rain poured over Blackwater Hills like a secret cracking open, cold and sudden. Isadora ran without looking back, vaulting the hedgerow that bordered the estate's eastern gardens. The leather ledger was pressed to her chest, slick with rain, but she didn't loosen her grip, not for a second. Behind her, alarms still screamed through the mansion. Security floodlights stabbed through the fog. But she slipped through the gap in the fence and into the dark woods just before the beams caught her. She didn't stop until she reached the narrow service road where Alma and Gabriel waited in a black car, engine running. Alma flung the door open. Get in. Isadora collapsed into the back seat, soaked, chest heaving. They know. They saw me. A man, scar across his face, he was guarding the vault. I barely made it. Gabriel turned from the passenger seat, his voice sharp. Did you get it? Isadora nodded and held up the ledger. I think this is it. Castillo Sr.'s personal notes. Lucia, behind the wheel, floored the gas. They disappeared down the road just as headlights crested the estate gates behind them. They didn't stop until they reached a borrowed farmhouse 40 miles south, where Lucia's contacts had secured them a hideout. The house sat on a hill above a wide field, fog rolling over it like breath. They dried off in silence, then gathered around the old oak dining table. Gabriel laid out the photos Isadora had taken inside the vault. Alma flipped through the pages with a tremor in her hands, then paused at a line scribbled hastily in red ink. Trust revision denied, must discuss with second party directly. Lucia's eyes narrowed. Second party? Navarro? Isadora asked. Gabriel shook his head. That would have been me. But I was 19 then, still in Argentina. They never brought me in. And I was never officially listed as a co-signatory. Alma reached for the ledger, flipping its cracked leather cover. Inside were dozens of handwritten entries, Castillo Sr.'s personal accounts, thoughts, concerns about Julian, fears about power being centralized. Then, tucked inside the back pocket of the ledger, they found a folded letter. The envelope was brittle with age. On the front, in faded black ink, it read, "To be opened only in the event of formal dispute. Witnessed by, M. Kovac." Isadora opened it slowly. Inside was a single-page letter, signed and dated. "In the event that my son Julian disregards the joint nature of this trust, and seeks to dissolve or amend it without proper representation, I declare that the second beneficiary, custodian of the original agreement, shall be Sofia Navarro." Beneath it, the signature of Matias Castillo. And beside it, in tighter script, "Witness, Marla Kovac." Everyone stared at the name. Gabriel's face went pale. "Sofia. Who is she?" Lucia asked. "She was my cousin. Emilio's granddaughter. She vanished in 2008 after the company was split. No one could reach her. We thought she moved to Chile. She must have been the original co-beneficiary. Emilio must have named her while I was still a minor. Castillo Sr. gave her custodianship," Alma said. "She wasn't just family. She was the legal anchor. That's why Julian buried the first contract, he couldn't override it without her consent. And he couldn't find her," Gabriel murmured. "So he erased her." Isadora leaned forward. "But now we know her name. We can look for her. If she's alive." Lucia was already on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. She accessed property records, immigration entries, corporate filings. At first, nothing. Then, there's a Sofia Navarro listed as a freelance language interpreter in Vancouver. Age matches. Last known address updated 6 months ago. Gabriel stood. "Get her on the phone." It took 3 hours to verify the number, then another hour of convincing someone to put Sofia on the line. When she finally answered, her voice was weary but steady. "Who is this?" she asked. Gabriel swallowed. "Sofia, it's Gabriel. Your cousin." A long pause. Then, "Why are you calling me now?" "Because the contract was never signed. The original. And we found a letter. You were named second beneficiary." Silence. Then the line shifted. "I never wanted to be dragged back into that world," she said quietly. "Do you know why I left? Julian didn't just push Emilio out. He threatened me. Said if I ever claimed anything, he'd make sure no court recognized me. He said no one would believe a girl who disappeared without a fight." Gabriel was quiet. "I believe you. I have the original draft," Sofia added after a moment. "My grandfather gave it to me. I hid it in a safety deposit box in Vancouver. I still have the key. I just never thought anyone would come looking." Isadora leaned into the phone. "We don't just need your document. We need you." There was another pause. Then Sofia's voice softened. "Send me an address. I'll come." The next day, Julian Castillo stood in his study, staring out over the estate gardens. A fresh pot of tea steamed beside him. His suit was immaculate. His expression unreadable. Across from him, the man with the scar waited, arms crossed. "She got into the vault," the man said. "Took the ledger." Julian didn't react. "She found the name. Sofia Navarro." Still, no reaction. Then Julian turned, eyes sharp. "Let them find her." The man frowned. "You're not going to stop her. I already tried to erase her once. If I try again now, it'll only confirm the story. Let them gather their pieces. Let them believe the walls are closing in." He poured himself a cup of tea. "They're going to file. I know Gabriel. He'll go straight to probate court. Then what do we do?" Julian sipped his tea and smiled faintly. "We do nothing. He turned the page of a newspaper on his desk. On the front, news of a private investment firm being sued for false asset claims. They think they've found the truth. But they haven't read the last clause. The scarred man shifted. What clause? Julian looked up. The one I wrote. The one no one knows exists. That night, Alma sat on the farmhouse porch, watching lightning crawl across the sky. Isadora came out beside her, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. He's going to fight back, isn't he? Isadora asked. Alma nodded. Like a man with everything to lose. Inside, Gabriel closed the ledger and passed the final scanned photo to Lucia. At the bottom of the page, in ink just beginning to fade, were 3 words Castillo Sr. had circled. Power without witness. Isadora stared at it and whispered, "What does that mean?" But no one had the answer. Not yet. And as Sofia Navarro packed her suitcase 2,000 miles away, a woman watched her from across the street, phone in hand. Then she made the call. It's her. She's moving. A pause. And then a voice on the other end said coldly. Don't let her reach Blackwater Hills. Sofia Navarro was halfway to the airport when she noticed the black sedan in her rearview mirror. At first, she told herself it was nothing, just traffic, just paranoia born from old scars. But it changed lanes when she did. Slowed when she slowed. Hung back when she sped up. She didn't panic. She turned off the main road and circled a block in Kitsilano, watching the sedan do the same. Then she made a decision. Instead of the airport, she drove to a downtown hotel near Cole Harbor, handed the valet her keys, and walked straight through the lobby to the rear exit. From there, she slipped down the alley, hailed a cab at the corner, and didn't look back. Inside her coat pocket, she clutched the small silver key to the safety deposit box. It had never left her side in 17 years. By the time she reached the bank, it was raining. 2 hours later, in the farmhouse in Blackwater Hills, Lucia's phone buzzed. She answered quickly, stepping into the hallway. Sophia? She's here, Sophia said, voice steady but tight. The documents are intact. I've had them notarized, scanned, and encrypted. I'll be on the next flight. Lucia paused. Are you sure? He knows you're coming. I don't care. If I stay quiet now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Then we'll meet you at the safe house in Whitaker County. I'll send coordinates. Gabriel, listening from the next room, nodded slowly. We're running out of time. Back at the Castillo estate, Marla Kovac stood in Julian's private study, flipping through a folder marked Witness Override. She was pale. Quiet. Julian stood by the fireplace, sipping from a crystal tumbler. She's alive, Marla said. And she has the document. Julian gave a slight nod. Let her bring it. Once it's in our jurisdiction, we move. Marla frowned. You still believe the override clause will hold up in court? Julian turned toward her, voice silk over steel. I wrote it myself. It was filed 2 years after the fake amendment, but backdated and buried inside a corporate merger in Luxembourg. No judge will find it. Not in time. Marla looked at him carefully. And if they do? Julian walked to the desk and opened a drawer. Inside was a photograph, faded, with worn edges. It showed 2 young men. Julian and Emilio. Standing on a rocky coastline. In the corner, barely visible, was a third figure, Sophia, maybe 13, standing back from the others. Julian stared at it a long moment. If they do, he said softly, then this ends differently. The next day, Isadora woke early and stood alone on the farmhouse porch. The wind carried the scent of pine and wet earth. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the red X on the contract copy, the man with the scar, the flickering lights of the Castillo vault. Gabriel joined her, two steaming mugs in hand. He handed one to her. "You look like you've aged 10 years. I feel like it. She's on her way. Sophia. If she makes it here safely." Isadora turned to him. "Do you think that's a real if?" Gabriel didn't answer. Sophia's flight touched down just after noon. She wore a dark coat, sunglasses, and no jewelry. In her bag, she carried only her passport, a change of clothes, and a slim document sleeve. The moment she cleared customs, she knew she was being followed again. Not in the obvious way, no footsteps echoing behind her, but in the way shadows clung too long, in the way a man reading a newspaper never turned a page. She walked to the rental car desk, signed the form without looking up, and slid into a silver sedan with a GPS tracker already disabled by Lucia's people. She drove 3 hours west, stopping once for gas and once to switch cars at a contact point arranged days earlier. She made it to Whitaker County at 7:12 p.m. Gabriel and Alma were already there, waiting in the candlelit kitchen of an old mill house once owned by a friend of Emilio's. Lucia double-checked the perimeter and took Sophia's phone the moment she arrived. Sophia embraced Alma tightly, two women who had seen the same cruelty in different corridors. Then she turned to Isadora. "You're her," Sophia said quietly. "The girl who found the contract." Isadora nodded, unsure what to say. Sophia studied her. "My grandfather said someone would come someday. Not a lawyer, not a Navarro. Someone unexpected." Isadora smiled, weary. "I was just doing laundry." They sat at the table, and Sophia unzipped the document sleeve. She removed 3 items. A copy of the original trust agreement, signed by Emilio and Matias Castillo, with the co-beneficiary clause underlined. A letter from Emilio to Sophia, explaining her custodianship and what to do if she were ever called upon. A sealed envelope with Julian's name scrawled in Emilio's tight, angled handwriting. Gabriel took it slowly, holding it like something that might burn through his fingers. Lucia placed the documents on the scanner and began uploading them to 3 separate legal repositories, time-stamping every step. By midnight, it was done. They had the evidence. The custodianship. The signatures. The sworn letters. The final blow would come in court. But miles away, in a hidden server room beneath a Castillo-owned building, the man with the scar was typing furiously. Marla stood over his shoulder. "Are you sure you can do this?" The man didn't look up. "We don't have to erase the files. We just delay them. Corrupt the metadata. Force revalidation. By the time the court sees them, they'll look incomplete. Like fakes." Julian entered the room. He looked at the screen for only a moment. Then nodded. "I'll handle the judge." At dawn, Isadora stood again at the window of the mill house. The air felt colder. Off. Then she saw it. A glint. Across the field, beyond the trees, just for a second. Someone watching. She woke Lucia instantly. By the time they reached the clearing, the watcher was gone. But they'd left something behind. A box. Inside it, a single photograph. A young Sofia Navarro, in the Castillo estate gardens. Her face was circled in red ink. And beneath it, in block letters. "You can't bury the dead." Lucia turned the photo over. On the back, coordinates. A location just outside Blackwater Hills. An old chapel, long abandoned. Sophia's hands trembled as she held it. "I know this place," she whispered. "My grandfather took me there once. He said there was something he wanted to hide, something too dangerous for safes and vaults." Gabriel looked at her. "What was it?" "I don't know," Sophia said, eyes wide. "But he called it the last insurance." Isadora's voice was almost a whisper. "Then we go there." Lucia nodded, grim. "But we don't go alone. The abandoned chapel stood deep in the woods just west of Blackwater Hills, cradled in mist and silence. Time had worn it down, moss blanketed the stone walls, the wooden doors hung crooked on rusted hinges, and a tree had broken through the steeple long ago. No one had worshipped here in decades. But now, 5 people stood at its threshold: Sophia, Gabriel, Alma, Isadora, and Lucia, cloaked in tension and uncertainty, surrounded by trees that whispered as if they knew something no one else did. Sophia stared up at the weather-worn building. "He brought me here once, when I was a child. We didn't go inside. He just said, 'If anything ever happens to me, this is where the truth sleeps.'" Lucia moved first. She pried the door open, its creaking echo swallowed by the woods. Inside, broken pews lay scattered across the cracked stone floor. Dust spiraled in the slivers of light that pierced the high windows. A collapsed altar stood at the far end, half swallowed by rubble. Gabriel stepped past her. "We search. Quietly. Every corner. Every stone." They split up. Isadora moved toward the altar. The air there felt heavier, the scent of old incense lingering. As she ran her hands along the crumbling base, her fingers caught on a metal loop embedded in the stone. She pulled. A groan echoed through the chapel as a hidden hatch opened beneath the altar, revealing a short staircase carved into the foundation. Everyone gathered. Sophia descended first, flashlight trembling in her grip. The stairwell led to a cold, stone cellar, no more than 10 feet across. And there, against the back wall, stood a metal trunk bolted to the ground. It was unmarked, save for a single number etched into the lid. 070894. Gabriel's breath caught. July 8, 1994. The day of the fire. Sophia dropped to her knees, hands shaking, and turned the dial of the built-in combination lock. Click. The lid creaked open. Inside were dozens of envelopes, each one sealed in plastic, labeled in Emilio Navarro's careful hand. There were photos, legal statements, bank records, letters of correspondence between Castillo Sr. and Emilio, and a videotape. Lucia pulled it out, squinting at the faded label. Matias, July 5, 1994. Sophia whispered, "That was 3 days before the fire." Gabriel stared at the tape. "We need a player. There's a lab in the city that can digitize this. We take it now. Tonight." Alma lifted a sealed envelope addressed to Sophia N., "For your eyes only," and tucked it into her coat without a word. As they packed the materials and prepared to leave, Isadora paused. Her flashlight caught something odd. The stone wall behind the trunk was not entirely solid. She ran her fingers along a thin crack, then pushed. A stone shifted inward. The wall opened. Behind it, hidden in a small cavity, was a wooden box wrapped in cloth. Inside, preserved perfectly, was a signed, notarized amendment, dated 2 weeks after the original unsigned contract. Julian's signature was present. But next to it, Sophia Navarro's forged name. Sophia stepped back in horror. "I never signed this." Lucia examined the ink. Different pen. Different angle. Sloppy. Gabriel nodded grimly. "Julian forged it. Buried it down here in case the truth ever surfaced." "But why keep it?" Isadora asked. "Why not destroy it?" Alma answered softly. "Because if anyone ever challenged him, he could present this and claim the signature had simply been lost. That it had been real all along. He kept it to rewrite history." Sophia stared at it, voice hardening. "Then now we rewrite it back." They returned to the farmhouse by nightfall, exhausted but resolved. Lucia immediately delivered the video to a private technician in the city with instructions for secure digitization and chain-of-custody documentation. By morning, it would be ready. Meanwhile, the group reviewed the contents of the chapel trunk. One envelope in particular drew everyone's attention. Subject, Property Transfer, Castillo/Navarro Holdings. Inside was a notarized agreement from 1991, when the Castillo and Navarro families had first formalized their partnership. The document detailed that all property would remain in a dual trust, unable to be divided unless both parties agreed in writing. Any attempt to circumvent it, it warned, would result in legal forfeiture. But beneath the clause, scribbled in Matias Castillo's handwriting, was a line they hadn't seen in any other copy. If Julian violates this agreement, I grant full investigative authority to the beneficiary, Sofia Enda, to challenge it through any lawful means. Lucia stared at it. That's it. That's the nail. Alma looked up. You still think he'll fight this in court? Gabriel answered. He'll do everything but walk in himself. Isadora frowned. What do you mean? He won't show up. Not personally. He'll send lawyers, files, denials. He'll delay, accuse, claim it's all doctored. But he'll never face us. Alma spoke quietly. Then we bring the court to him. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Lucia filed a petition with the Blackwater Probate Court, backed by Sofia's claim of custodianship, the original trust agreement, the forged amendment, the ledger, and the sealed letters from the chapel. But just hours later, the court clerk called. The judge had recused himself. No reason given. The replacement judge was a recent appointee. And coincidentally, a former board consultant for one of Julian's shell companies. Lucia slammed her fist against the car door. It's starting. He's burying the process. Gabriel was quiet. Then we go public. Isadora looked at him. What, just release it all? No. Not everything. Just enough. We leaked the original and signed contract and the letter from Castillo Sr. to the press. Let people see the cracks. Lucia hesitated. It's risky. If the press spins it wrong, he gets sympathy. We picked the right journalist, Gabriel said. Someone who can't be bought. That night, while Lucia drafted the media dossier, Alma stepped outside with Sofia. They stood beneath the stars. The fields dark and endless around them. Alma handed Sofia the unopened envelope addressed to her. I didn't read it, she said. It's yours. Sofia opened it slowly, eyes scanning the page. As she read, tears welled in her eyes. Her voice broke as she whispered the words aloud. My dear Sofia. If this finds you, it means Julian has done what I feared. I leave this to you not because I want to burden you, but because you are the last person I trust to do the right thing. Not just for our family, but for the truth itself. Yours always. Emilio. Sofia folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. I should have spoken up sooner. Alma rested a hand on her shoulder. You're speaking now. That's enough. But just as they turned to go back inside, Isadora burst through the door. Her voice was sharp with fear. It's the video. It's been hacked. The technician just called, he was attacked. The file is gone. Lucia pushed past her. What? He said someone knew exactly what to look for. The original tape is missing. The backup files were corrupted. He barely escaped. Gabriel froze. Then the last voice of Matias Castillo. Is gone, Isadora whispered. But just then, her phone buzzed. A single email. No subject. No sender. She opened it. A link to a private, encrypted folder. And one line of text. You're not the only one who made copies. They stared at the screen. Then Sofia whispered, who sent that? But no one had the answer. And miles away, deep in the heart of Blackwater, a woman sat alone in an empty office. She closed her laptop, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, just to herself. Let them come. At 3:43 a.m., the email was still the only sign of hope. Isadora sat in the glow of the farmhouse's kitchen light, scrolling through the encrypted folder. It contained just one video file, large, high-resolution, untouched. The tape from the chapel. She opened it. The screen flickered, then revealed a grainy living room. Matias Castillo sat at a small desk, glasses perched on his nose, a stack of documents at his elbow. He looked older than any photo Isadora had ever seen, tired, frayed at the edges. A man who knew what was coming. If you're seeing this, then I've failed. Or perhaps I've been silenced. He coughed once, then continued. Julian is my son. My blood. But blood does not make a man honorable. Emilio Navarro saved my life. Twice. Once in the fire, and once in what followed. We built this company together. It was never meant to belong to just one family. That trust was sacred. But Julian. He paused, lips pressing thin. Julian wants total control. He thinks Navarro is a name to erase, not honor. I fear what he will become. That's why I named Sophia. She saw things clearly. She knew how to stay quiet, and when not to. The old man looked directly into the camera. If he hides the original contract, if he tampers with the trust, know this, it was never valid without Sophia. And if he tries to invoke the syndicate clause, stop him. The screen glitched slightly. Isadora froze it. Syndicate clause, she whispered. She rewound it and listened again. If he tries to invoke the syndicate clause, stop him. Gabriel, awakened by the flickering light, stepped into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. What is it? Isadora turned the laptop. The tape. It's real. Unaltered. But he mentioned something I've never seen before. A syndicate clause. Gabriel sat down slowly, dread creeping into his expression. I've only heard whispers. My grandfather once mentioned it when he thought I was asleep. It was part of a contingency deal, a clause buried so deep, it wasn't in the legal copies. Something only Matias and Julian knew how to trigger. Alma entered, already dressed, her face drawn. What kind of contingency? Gabriel spoke carefully. It was an escape hatch. If the trust ever came under threat from within, Julian could activate the clause and transfer all core assets to a third-party syndicate. One that wouldn't be bound by family lines. One that would never let go. Lucia joined them with her laptop. That's illegal. No, Gabriel said grimly. It's immoral. Not illegal. The clause was embedded in offshore partnerships. He'd essentially be selling Castillo and Navarro's soul to a holding firm in the Caymans. A firm that answers to no court, no country. Do we have proof? Isadora asked. Lucia sat down beside her and began pulling files. Not yet. But if it exists, it'll be in the Luxembourg amendment Julian mentioned before. The one Marla buried under that merger. I need 36 hours and a backdoor into the filing servers. You have 24, Gabriel said. Once the media sees the tape, Julian will act fast. That morning, the video was uploaded anonymously to 3 independent investigative news outlets. The file was verified by 2 separate forensic analysts before being posted. It went viral in under 4 hours. By mid-afternoon, Julian Castillo's name was trending worldwide, alongside terms like forged trust, buried contract, and beneficiary fraud. Financial reporters swarmed Castillo and Wren Holdings headquarters. Protesters appeared outside the estate gates. Social media erupted with calls for investigation. But Julian didn't hide. Instead, he held a press conference. Standing in front of his towering estate, flanked by security, he gave a perfect performance, controlled, wounded, righteous. These accusations are both painful and false. My father's letter is tragic, but it is not legal precedent. My legal team will challenge every forged document, every manipulated tape. And let me be clear, there is no clause, no trust agreement, no contract that can destroy what we've built. He smiled slightly. We are prepared for every move. Behind him, Marla Kovac stood like a statue. But inside her jacket, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. A single message. Syndicate protocol requested. Begin transfer within 48 hours. Her hand trembled slightly. Julian turned and walked back inside, the gates closing behind him like a fortress. Back at the farmhouse, Lucia stood frozen at her screen. They're doing it. What? The transfer. I just intercepted a shadow request from an offshore IP, confirmed Luxembourg origin. Shell company tied to an entity called Dorian Stratagem Holdings. Gabriel paled. That's the syndicate. They've activated the clause. In 48 hours, everything will be gone. All assets, accounts, property. Once it's done, it'll be impossible to claw back. The company won't exist under any legal name anymore. Isadora's voice rose. Can we stop it? Lucia sat back. We can stall it, but not without someone inside. Alma stepped forward. Then we give them someone inside. Everyone looked at her. She looked at Isadora. You're the only one they haven't burned yet. You were their intern. Their assistant. You know the estate. You have the badge. Isadora stared at her. You want me to go back? They won't suspect you. Not after the media leak. They'll think you're gone. But if you can access Marla's office again. Lucia nodded slowly. We can trace the syndicate transfer. And if you can copy the authorizing documents, we can present them before the court issues a freeze. Gabriel was shaking his head. It's too dangerous. If they catch her. I'll do it, Isadora said, voice quiet but firm. Alma turned sharply. No. Isadora stepped closer. Yes. I will. You've protected this truth for years, Mama. It's my turn. Alma's lips parted to argue, but stopped. She saw something in her daughter's face. Something steady. Something unbreakable. Like her father had been, once. Alma nodded slowly. Then I'm going with you. At midnight, under cover of rain and fog, Alma and Isadora drove silently toward the Castillo estate. In the back seat sat a small device, a portable scanner and data scrambler Lucia had modified herself. Isadora looked down at the lanyard on her lap. The fake badge. The forged clearance. The key to walking straight into the lion's mouth. As the estate gates loomed ahead, Alma placed a hand on her daughter's arm. You know where to go. Isadora nodded. East wing. Marla's office. Second drawer from the left. I saw her use it for offshore filings. And if you're caught. Isadora met her gaze. I won't be. The gate opened. They drove inside. Back into the house of secrets. Back into the dark. Inside, the estate was quiet. Too quiet. Isadora slipped through the side entrance, past the kitchen, down the familiar corridor to Marla's wing. She reached the office. No alarm. No guard. She opened the drawer. Inside were 5 folders, each labeled with innocuous names. But one had no label at all. She opened it. There it was. Dorian Stratagem Holdings, Transfer Protocol Authorization. Isadora snapped photos, fed each page through Lucia's scanner, heart pounding. The final page had something terrifying. Beneficiary override, Clause B/custodian signature, SMN, forged. They were using her name. Sophia's. To fake approval of the transfer. She grabbed the folder, stuffed it into her bag, and turned. But someone was standing in the doorway. The man with the scar. He didn't speak. He just stepped aside, revealing Marla. She smiled, just slightly. I was wondering when you'd come back. Isadora didn't move. Marla stepped into the room, calm as ever. You're good. Smarter than I expected. But you don't know the full story, dear. She opened her hand. Inside it was a flash drive. She tossed it onto the desk. What's that? Isadora asked. Marla's smile faded. The real syndicate clause. Then, for the first time, her voice shook. I kept it. Insurance. Julian never knew. Isadora stared at her. Why are you giving this to me? Marla looked down. Because I was there. The night of the fire. She looked up again. And her eyes were wet. I know what really happened. And if Julian finishes this transfer, no one will ever find out. Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, Isadora reached slowly for the drive. But just before her fingers touched it, the estate alarms shrieked to life again. Lights flared. Doors slammed. And someone shouted. She's inside. Marla's eyes went wide. They found us. Isadora grabbed the drive. And ran. Isadora tore down the corridor as the estate's alarm wailed through the stone halls, echoing like a scream from the walls themselves. Behind her, boots pounded in rhythm, men shouting, radios crackling. She clutched the flash drive in her right hand and the forged transfer documents in her bag, willing herself not to trip, not to panic. Not now. Ahead, the east garden door was still unlocked. She dove through it just as a figure lunged from the side, arms grazing her shoulder. She twisted, slammed the door shut behind her, and sprinted into the maze of hedges beyond. Alma was waiting with the car just outside the service gate. Isadora vaulted through the passenger door, shouting, "Drive." Alma didn't hesitate. Tires screeched on the rain-slick pavement as the car peeled away from the estate. Behind them, security lights lit up the night like spotlights, but they were already gone. 10 minutes later, they switched vehicles, Lucia's backup SUV, prepped and waiting on a farm road. Alma slammed the driver's door and turned to Isadora. You have it? Isadora nodded, breathless. The protocol. And something more. She held up the flash drive. Marla gave me this. Said it's the real syndicate clause. Lucia took it without a word, plugging it into her laptop as soon as they were on the road. The screen lit up. A single PDF file. Castillo/Navarro Trust, Syndicate Override Provision, Confidential Draft, July 8, 1994. They read in silence. Then Lucia swore under her breath. He used his father's authority to build this. It bypasses normal court processes entirely. The clause gives emergency transfer rights to a corporate guardian if the trust is deemed compromised by internal betrayal. That's what he's claiming now. Isadora leaned forward. So if Sophia files a claim against Julian, he can claim that she is the betrayal, and trigger the clause. Yes, Lucia said grimly. But only if he can prove she wasn't the original custodian. Gabriel looked up. Then we need to prove she was. Sophia, standing in the corner, spoke softly. There's one more thing I haven't told you. Everyone turned to her. In 2008, the last time I ever saw Matthias, he gave me a key. Said it was to a room he never let Julian enter. A study hidden in the original estate, what's now the guest house. Gabriel blinked. That place was sealed years ago. It was sealed, Sophia said. But not destroyed. If what he left behind is still there, we'll find more than just papers. He promised. Written proof of intent. Alma looked between them. So we go back. Lucia shook her head. We'll never get near the estate again. But the guest house isn't on the main grounds. It's outside the perimeter walls. Technically a separate property. Gabriel's voice dropped. We break in. No, Sophia said. We don't break in. We unlock it. She reached into her coat and held out a small brass key, blackened with age. Isadora stared. You kept it all this time. Sophia smiled faintly. I never let it out of my sight. At midnight, the team parked on a ridge overlooking the guest house. It was small by Castillo standards, just 3 stories, an ivy-covered stone facade, with boarded windows and cracked roof tiles. It hadn't been touched since the fire. But that was the point. As they approached, Lucia disabled the outer camera grid with a signal jammer. Gabriel pried open the fence, and Sophia led them up the overgrown path to the back door. The key turned with a low, metallic groan. The door creaked open. The air inside was stale, wood, rot, and memory. Dust thick as snow blanketed every surface. Books still lined the shelves. Papers yellowed and curling. The room was like a mausoleum for secrets. Sophia moved to the back wall and pressed her hand to the fireplace. The brick clicked. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a compartment tucked deep in the stone. Inside it, a wooden box. No lock. Just a velvet ribbon and a name carved into the lid. Navarro. Sophia opened it. Inside were 3 items. A letter of custodianship, handwritten, signed by Matthias, notarized independently in 1993. A photo of Sophia, Emilio, and Matthias, together, arms around each other, dated just weeks before the fire. And a final envelope addressed to whoever comes last. Isadora opened it carefully. The letter was brief. If you are reading this, then you are not the first, nor the strongest. You are the most patient. Julian's power comes from fear. Break his chain of control, and he has nothing left. The truth is not enough. Let the people see what he did to hide it. Lucia whispered, it's not just about contracts anymore. Gabriel nodded. It's about legacy. About shame. Alma turned suddenly. Wait. She moved toward the floorboards in the corner of the room. Her foot had landed on something hollow. She knelt, pulled up 2 boards, and beneath them, wrapped in layers of waxed cloth, was a fireproof case. Inside, cassette tapes. Dozens of them. Each labeled with dates and names. 1993, Marla, CONF2. 1994, Julian, Office, Revision Meeting. 1994, Syndicate Call, Emergency Protocol. Gabriel gasped. He recorded everything. Lucia smiled. This is the kill shot. They took everything. But as they exited the guest house and crossed the property line, a shadow detached from the trees. The man with the scar stepped into their path. This time, he didn't speak. He just raised a phone to his ear and said one word. Now. Lights exploded from the trees. Spotlights. Voices. The sound of SUVs roaring onto the path. Armed men, security, hired privately, surrounded them. Sophia grabbed Isadora's hand. Gabriel stepped in front of them. But the one who walked forward wasn't Julian. It was Marla. Her hair was pulled back, suit immaculate. She looked directly at Sophia. You've come far, she said. But you've miscalculated. Sophia stared at her. You gave us the claws. You helped us. I did, Marla said. Because I wanted you to find it. I wanted you to see what Julian built. Lucia stepped forward. Why? Marla looked up at the sky for a long moment, then back at them. Because I'm tired of hiding the fire. She raised a hand. The armed guards didn't restrain them. Instead, they stepped aside. Marla pulled a USB drive from her coat pocket and handed it to Sophia. This is the original syndicate agreement. The one Julian thought was deleted. The one that links the transfer directly to his father's death. Isadora's breath caught. You mean? Marla nodded. He didn't just forge a contract. He accelerated the end. Gabriel whispered, "You're switching sides." Marla turned, already walking into the trees. "I'm just telling the truth. The same way you are." And then she was gone. The next morning, Lucia filed the evidence with the federal court. The video. The tapes. The custodianship. The syndicate clause. And the final document, the agreement linking Julian to the Midnight Emergency Protocol, activated days before Matias Castillo died in the fire that destroyed half the estate. Within hours, the court issued a full injunction. Julian Castillo's assets were frozen. His corporate holdings suspended. An arrest warrant issued, sealed until delivery. At the farmhouse, they waited. Sophia sat by the window. Isadora sat across from her. Then, a knock. Alma opened the door. Outside stood a federal agent. And beside him, Julian Castillo. In handcuffs. Face expressionless. He looked once at Sophia. Then at Isadora. His mouth curled into a cold, final smile. "You think this is the end?" he asked softly. Sophia stepped forward. "No," she said. "This is just the truth." And the door closed behind him. The trial of Julian Castillo began 17 days after his arrest. By then, the world already knew. Every network, every newspaper, every feed had covered the scandal, the buried contract, the forged amendment, the missing co-beneficiary, the secret tapes from the guest house, and the final, damning proof that linked Julian's personal syndicate transfer to the death of his own father. But what the headlines couldn't capture was the weight of it, the silence that clung to the Castillo estate, the rooms that no longer echoed with orders barked through intercoms, or the gardens now overgrown and left to reclaim their wild roots. The prosecution called 3 witnesses on the first day, Sofia Navarro, Gabriel Navarro, and Isadora Reyes. Each one, in their own way, shattered the illusion of Julian's legacy. Sofia recited the names of rooms she had been banned from as a teenager. The places Emilio whispered to her in passing. The promises Matias had made while Julian was away. Gabriel read excerpts from the ledger, pausing after each entry until the courtroom's silence grew uncomfortable. Isadora recounted the moment she found the original contract in the archive. "I thought I was just sorting files," she said. "But once I saw the signature line, blank, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't just legal deception. It was betrayal." Lucia presented the recordings last. One by one, they played for the court and for the world. Julian's voice, clipped and cold, discussing emergency clauses. Syndicate accounts. Transfer schedules. Then, the final tape, a scratchy, nighttime recording from July 6, 1994. "We'll do it Friday. He signs, or he doesn't wake up." The courtroom went still. And in that silence, Alma Reyes wept. Not loudly. Just one breath catching in her throat. A lifetime of dust dislodged. Julian never testified. His lawyers tried to argue duress, mental instability, media bias, legacy pressure. But the court had more than documents. It had his voice. His patterns. His signature in ink he thought would never surface. The jury returned in less than a week. Guilty. On all charges, fraudulent conversion of trust, beneficiary suppression, conspiracy to defraud, and indirect culpability in the circumstances of his father's death. The judge sentenced him to 30 years. But the real verdict came outside the courthouse. As Julian Castillo was led into the transport van, flanked by federal officers, he passed Isadora, Sofia, and Alma standing on the steps. He looked at Alma first. You cleaned my house for a decade. And you never said a word. Alma replied, voice calm and even, you never looked me in the eye long enough to hear one. Then Julian turned to Isadora. You have no idea what you've done. But she stepped forward, met his gaze. I know exactly what I've done. You're the one who forgot what you signed. Or didn't. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he was gone. The van pulled away. And Julian Castillo, once heir to a fortune, vanished into the system he had spent his life avoiding. In the months that followed, the Castillo and Navarro estate underwent the most radical shift in its history. Federal auditors moved in. The trust was dismantled. Assets redistributed. A third of the remaining holdings were returned to the Navarro family by court order. Sofia declined any cash settlement. She converted her portion into a public trust, a foundation in Emilio's name. Its charter was simple: protect inheritance rights, expose concealed power transfers, and provide legal defense for whistleblowers within elite financial networks. Lucia agreed to serve as counsel. Gabriel joined as the board's chair. And Alma? She declined all official titles. Instead, she returned to her own small apartment, renovated it, and started an after-school program for girls like Isadora, bright, unnoticed, just waiting to be told they were allowed to look deeper. Isadora herself was offered everything: board seats, law school scholarships, media deals. She chose none of them. She disappeared for a while, quiet in the way only someone who had faced too much noise could be. She traveled. Worked quietly for an NGO in South America. Wrote, but never published. Until one day, nearly 2 years later, Sofia received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a leather-bound journal. The title pressed into the cover. The signature line. On the first page, a dedication. For those who never got to sign their names. And for the ones who forged ahead anyway. Sofia smiled, then closed the book gently. One crisp morning in late fall, Alma stood outside the old Castillo estate. The gates were gone now. The hedges overgrown. And the mansion had been donated, gutted, and repurposed. A community library now stood where Julian once made private deals. She walked inside and paused in front of a plaque in the marble foyer. In memory of truths buried and voices raised. Below that, in etched silver. Donated by the Navarro Foundation. In honor of Matias Castillo and Emilio Navarro. Custodians of an unfinished promise. A few feet away, a small bronze sculpture stood on a pedestal, 2 hands, one open, one holding a pen. Alma stood there for a long time. Then a voice called from behind her. Mama. Isadora. She was older now. Calmer. Wearing a brown coat that reminded Alma of the one she used to wear on the early morning walks to the estate gates. Alma smiled. You came home. I never left. They stepped out together into the light. And behind them, for the first time in years, the Castillo name stood not as a warning, but as a lesson. Not about power. But about what happens when you try to sign your future on someone else's line. And forget who it really belongs to.